So the next one, the animation we want to talk about is we call path transition. So the path transition, the UML diagram. Here is the path transition UML diagram. So you can see here they have path transition. You can have default constructor without any path parameter, or you can give them the duration. So you can see earlier our timeline is at keyframe with the duration, but the path transition is still on specific animation. You can specify your duration, you can specify your path, and your node. So the path only can be shape. So that's the meaning for path transition. Path transition, you can see that's the path. So you will follow a path to move your object. So that object can be any node. So that's what we call the path transition. So the path transition is like this one. We have a path is the circle. So then we have rectangle, we just follow to move the transition. So each duration, that's just mean your path. So that's why here we have the path is you will have the rectangle to move the circle around. So then we do auto reverse. So that's our path transition. So when we create our path transition, you can see here, you just need to have your rectangle. That's the object we want to move. So then the circle we create is the radius. We have xy value and the radius. So then we just need to add then to our pen. So then after we create, so then they will just display the object. After we see, they will display like that. So we have circle display and object. So you see, because they are in the pen, we have their coordinates. So that's why even I change the size for the window, they won't change. But that's the circle, that's rectangle. Your rectangle can be any value at the beginning. So then at the end, they will follow the path to move. But here, actually, we just add to the GUI. We didn't make them become animation yet, right? So after you have GUI display, so then we make the animation. So we make the animation, you will see here, you just create your path transition. You can either have your duration, path, and the node specified here, or we can do separately. So that's why here we set the duration equal to 4 seconds. So that's why you see that's a 4 seconds, they will finish, have the route, this path. So the path is circle, then rectangle. So you can set orientation. So here, actually, we just do the, by default, you can do parallel or a tangent. So the tangent just means you want the rectangle display like this, or you want them to display like the other way. Okay, so later I will show you the other way. So the cycle count, we just do the infinitely. So then we will have the auto reverse. But don't forget, please play your animation. So that's why they can play. So this one is have your orientation is tangent. So that's why they were perpendicular to the rectangle, perpendicular to the circle. So then that's changed to the parallel. See, actually earlier we said the orientation equal to tangent. So that's how the rectangle is perpendicular to the circle. But if you don't do anything, by default you have nothing. That means they do the parallel. So you see, after we comment out, we run again. So that's the GUI display. So that's why you can see the rectangle actually is parallel to the circle. So that's the tangent and the parallel. Okay, so then we just have our GUI back to the normal. That's the tangent one. Okay, so one thing is the same thing. I can set the mouse. You can see if I want them to pose. Okay, so then I just set press to pose the animation. So when I release, I make the animation start. Okay, so this one actually will make the mouse radius to the circle. So you can just set the mouse press. So when I move my mouse inside within the circle, you see, because I radius only on circle, so that's why my mouse click on press on other place, they won't have any response. So since I radius to the circle, so when I press, they pause the animation. So when I release, they will just continue to play. So that's the path transition demo. But one thing is, how about I don't like my animation is like the pen. You see when I enlarge my window. So the good thing is they don't change. But how about I really want is my circle can be always in the middle of my window. So how should I do that? So if you remember, if I want to resize my windows, but the circle is still in the middle, I need to do the binding, right? Okay, so let's see how we will do the binding. Okay, so now actually I want you to change your file to the other one is PathTransition bind demo. So this one is in your source file, but I didn't put in the PowerPoint file. So this one is like earlier I say, if I always want my circle to display in the middle, so how should I do? So since we use the pen, right? So that's why here, when we use the pen, that's why we need to have our circle need to bind with our width property and height property. So that's why you can see here, our circle always in the middle. But one thing I want to show you is after you do the binding, right? Before we say the binding, after I resize my window, the circle should be bind to the middle, right? Right, so that's what we see here. Let me resize the window. But did you see what happened? When I resize the window, right, the circle is still in the middle. But how come my rectangle is still moving to the same animation? Right, because one thing is, you do bind your circle, but my animation, because when I start to play the animation, I already follow the original path, right? So we see that's the original path. So that's why when your animation starts, you're binding, right? Your width, window size change, you bind the circle. But circle didn't notify the animation. So that's why here I want to talk about the other one is, sometimes when we have the observable object, when we want to do the binding, actually when the observable object change the value, we also need to change the value. So that's why we need to inform our animation path changed. So we need to stop our animation and restart. So that's why now here I want to show you is, sometimes we can add the listener, not only go to the button, not only radius to the radio button checkbox, we also can radius to the binding property. So that's what we call the observable object to add the listener. So this listener, actually, they will have this listener need to add to the observable object. So that's the property you want to bind. So that's why we use the add listener method. So then you have an invalidation listener you need to add. So we see the example like this. For example, I have a double property called balance. So then here, I just say simply that's the double value. If I want to add the listener to a property, you just do add the listener. So then you have a new invalidation listener. So this invalidation listener, they have a method you need to override. Is this one. It's invalidated. So then this one is how you will do your listener. So this one will just show you the whole thing about how you add a listener and what is the new object, the invalidation of listener you need to add. So of course, they have only one method. You can using the lambda expression as well. So on the other hand, like earlier, we have our GUI like this. But you see, because I didn't bind the object change, so that's why even I change resize, the circle still follow the window size. But one thing is this animation didn't be adjusted. So that's why here we need to do is we need to bind the listener to the binding property. So here is earlier I comment out. We need to add the listener to the pen property because only the pen property change the value. So the circle will change the value. So since the bind property change the value, my animation need to start or replay. So that's why here you see that's our animation need to start or restart again. So that need to according to what? According to the pen change. So earlier our circle bind to our pen, right? So you will have width property and the height property. So then again the same thing. This one, your pen width property and the height property, we also need to add the listener. So here it's the same thing, it's just the variable name. So just usually the observable listener we use OX. But here you see if you want to change to E, you like the E, we just do E. Okay, so actually this one just the object variable name. Okay, so then you can see here once your width property or height property changed, you need to make the change. You need to stop your animation, then you replay again. So now we see here, after we change, we rerun our program. So you see here, that's originally, right, they start in the middle. But here, after I change my circle, you see, that's why when I start, now I'm still changing, right? So when I change the value, actually, you see, they replay the animation. Because you do the path transition, so every time they replay, they need to start from the circle, start from the 0 degree. You see, so again, whenever you change the size, the listener add, so then they restart the animation. So here we show you the path transition. Sometimes you need to do the binding. And also we show you the other thing is, whenever you have your binding relationship, so your bind property, they also need to add a listener. So that's why when your bind property value changed, so then your animation changed. So this one you also can do which example? Did you remember your lab exercise 10? I asked you to have two circles. One circle is in the middle. So then when you resize your window, so then you see the circle, the middle circle changed. Yeah, that should be assignment 10. So did you remember you bind this one of the circle? So after you resize your window, so the circle did change. But one thing is your distance didn't change. So you can think about now, you know how to add to the listener now. So how you will make your distance display changed. So for your assignment 10, can you try to get, like here before, you see assignment 10, you have your circle 1 in the middle. But now after we resize, how can you make the distance display also changed? So that's why you need to add the listener to your binding property.